Awesome. Well, we have actually a pretty large cohort that's been filing in. We'll let people join in the next couple of minutes, but I think what we can do, Enzo, is just get started. And since this is being recorded, we'll send this out to all participants. So if people missed the first few minutes, we'll make sure that we fill in anything that they may have missed. So what I'll do is I'll turn around my screen and would love to talk through the agenda, but also before we get to that, just want to do a couple quick intros. As mentioned in the kind of the title here, as you know, we at Stytch are talking with Enzo from June. The ultimate topic that we want to focus on today is building a high-performing B2B signup flow. And before we get into the different agenda items, as a quick introduction, I'm Reed, co-founder and CEO at Stytch. We're an authentication platform that makes it easy for customer-facing authentication. If you want to build signup login flows for B2C or in particular B2B, like we'll be talking about today. A little bit of, and I figured Enzo, we could both give a little bit of the origin story for why we started our company and why we're passionate about what we're working in. My co-founder and I worked at a consumer company called Plaid, which was responsible for connecting bank accounts with applications like Venmo, Robinhood, Coinbase, et cetera. We both worked on authentication there in a very consumer-facing lens, where how do you allow a user to connect their bank account to Venmo? And it wasn't until we started Stytch about 3 years ago that we started getting really deep into B2B authentication, as we had to build that out for Stytch's own customers, and where we ran into a lot of the idiosyncrasies that come with managing organizations, handling deduplication, SSO, et cetera, and all the things that come with B2B auth. And so excited to talk about B2B signup flows, as it's maybe not where we originally came from in our experience at Plaid, but is something that we've become very intimately familiar with, both in our own experience at Stytch and then in launching a B2B authentication product.
Pretty awesome. Should I go on?
Yes. Yeah, please do.
Awesome. Yeah. So I probably come from the other side, but we're meeting halfway today. So I'm Enzo. I'm the CEO and co-founder of June. We are plug and play analytics for B2B SaaS. What it means is that we're turnkey. You can just plug our solution and get out of the box, analytics for your product. And we are fit for purpose for B2B SaaS and all the needs. And my background was in product management, met my co-founder at Intercom. We use a lot of product analytics, probably most of the data tools out there. We were always very frustrated about the pain and the technicality to use them. And so we basically built something very, very simple for people like us that just want their job to be easy and move on. And I'm very passionate about the topic of onboarding. It was actually my first mission when I started product management. I've worked more than a year on the onboarding of a fintech app in Berlin called N26, including on the auth process and the impact that it would have on the conversion rate. And so I'm super happy to be able to connect the dots today and talk about onboarding, auth, activation, and how you measure that and package it together.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that intro, Enzo. And yeah, excited to chat through a number of different things today around higher performing signup flows. So first, we'll cover a little bit of context on what are some of the key questions or topics that you should be thinking about as you're thinking about B2B SaaS signup and login. And then we'll dive deeper into each of the different topics where Enzo and I are domain experts relative to what our companies do and what we've seen work well for B2B signup flows, but also some of the pitfalls that you might want to avoid when it comes to things like building authentication for B2B, or in June's use case, building analytics on top of your B2B SaaS application so that you can tell what converts, where there's drop off, and how to activate users once they do sign up. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll leave 15 minutes for Q&A. So at any point during the session, feel free to just drop in any questions that you have, and we'll make sure that we cover them today. Cool. So some of the key questions that we'll talk about either adjacently or directly in today's session, and some of the key questions that you should be considering as you're thinking about how to build a B2B signup flow that meets your needs are questions like, what tools do you need to build versus buy? How do you optimize your flow for acquisition and retention? Really, B2B signup flows are touching a few different things. They're touching first adoption of your product and that acquisition piece. But they're also touching activation. How do you actually get the user to the magical moment that makes them more likely to come back? And then ultimately over time, as somebody comes back to log into your flow, retention is a key piece that sign up and authentication flows touch. The other piece that we'll talk about is how to measure your performance of your sign up flow, both where to start when you have no analytics at all. And then if you already even have a mature analytics flow, what are the things that June has seen that they'd recommend in terms of kind of keying in on the key metrics that can really move the needle. And then also we'll talk about how does this change as you scale. As a B2B company, typically you start by selling to smaller companies, startups, SMBs, et cetera. And quickly you'll find that you're going up market for those larger deals. And the needs change as well for those customers. So we'll talk about both how to encounter that from an authentication perspective, but also analytics, how you segment different customer sets and what to think about there. And prior to us jumping into each of these different topics, Enzo, I was curious if there's anything that you wanted to tease as kind of some of the key pieces that you'd have people keep in mind as we walk through this before we get to the analytics section about what people should be thinking of when it comes to key metrics, and also maybe some of the pitfalls to avoid as you're thinking about building a B2B sign-up flow.
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think the first thing I would say is that all of the things we're going to discuss today are very iterative. So you're basically going to go through a couple of phases and you're going to build your onboarding flow or your sign-up flow in many different ways, depending on the phase you're at, what you're trying to prove, what you're trying to validate, also some strategic, aspect of your business you're trying to prove. And so there's a lot of things you're going to ditch. And so I think I'm a big believer of not over-engineering these things if you can. And so I'll try to share some thoughts about that, basically.
Awesome. That sounds great. And two areas that in particular we'll focus on are first, authentication and the role that it plays in B2B sign-up and login. How does it affect both activation and scalability as you try to serve larger and larger customers over time as a B2B SaaS app? And then analytics, both why you need it, which is probably evident to everyone that you want to understand what's happening with your application, but also there's so many different things that you could measure. What are the highest intent pieces to measure and what are the elements that you should be focusing on early? And then how do you go about setting up those analytics in a way that's scalable? And so I'll walk through the authentication piece, and it's actually really helpful that Enzo's also worked heavily on OAuth in the past, as we will talk about authentication methods, sign-up methods, et cetera. So it'll be great to get his perspective there. And then I'll hand it off to Enzo to go deeper on the analytical side and some of their learnings from June. So first, just diving into auth. For B2B companies, auth touches multiple surface areas. It directly touches customer experience, but also touches security and the stakeholders at B2B customers that care about security, like IT admins, et cetera. And then finally, it also touches things like product adoption. So whether it's easy to invite team members, whether it's easy for team members to self-serve joining your organization so that they can experience the product. And there's a very large element there in terms of how you want to handle sign up for multiple members across organizations that we'll get into in a bit more detail. So I think it's pretty obvious to say that authentication is a critical investment for B2B apps. It's often the first impression that you're giving a customer. And in B2B, the one thing that I think is most important to take away when you think about authentication is that if you've ever built or touched consumer authentication in the past, while the authentication methods are relatively similar, things like email password, sign in with Google, sign in with Microsoft, magic links, et cetera, the actual things that you need to think about from a data model perspective are very different when it comes to B2B authentication. And the reason for that is that in B2C authentication, there's really only one end user that you need to think about as a customer. It is Enzo signing up for your consumer application, and Enzo might have a preference for signing with Google or signing with Apple, and you'll just do things like session management, user management, et cetera. In B2B, your customer is the organization that Enzo belongs to. So you both care about Enzo having a really good experience, but often Enzo is actually fitting into a company where they have different security requirements from their IT team about how somebody can access a SaaS app, whether they need to use things like the company's single sign-on. They might also have mandates such as every user logging into certain apps needs to use MFA. They might have custom session duration limits, such as a session should never be longer than 24 hours, et cetera. So overall, you kind of open up a can of worms for complexity in B2B because you're no longer serving just the end user. You're serving both the end user and the organization's needs that they belong to. And so the most common thing that you'll see come up is the level of advanced authentication and authorization controls that the organization needs on top of the user of your B2B app. So things like, how do you provision new user accounts, allow them to both create and join organizations? How do you control the permission settings and user access for what they do within that application? And then how do you ultimately mitigate security risks related to user accounts? And so across the customer journey, there's a few different things that are going to repeatedly come up in B2B authentication. The first is security and making sure not just that your application is secure, but that the people that you're selling into, those companies, feel that your B2B SaaS app fits into their security architecture and needs as an organization. The second piece, though, is that it only matters whether you fit into the needs of that organization if you can convince the members of that organization that there's value in your product. And this is where conversion becomes really important. How do you both get people to sign up, but also come back to the application? So thinking about things like low friction authentication, how long to keep users logged in for, making it as simple as possible for people not to hit dead ends. For example, a common dead end in B2B when B2B authentication has not been thought through, maybe an example where you go to try to join an organization, it says somebody's already created an organization for that @domain.com, and now you need to go find out who that person was internally and get them to add you. That's a common stopping point where people will run into friction or issues, or they'll accidentally create a duplicate account. The last piece that we'll talk about a little bit more in this is scale. One of the things that's really common in B2B is that as you scale, the authentication needs of those customers of yours change because you're no longer just serving startups and SMBs. You're also serving enterprises that require things like single sign-on or might have more idiosyncratic identity needs when it comes to what they're requiring. So one other thing I want to note when it comes to pieces like the sign-up flow in particular and the authentication methods that you do present is that even though authentication can often feel like a checkbox, it's something that you have to have rather than maybe a differentiator. If you get B2B auth right, you can drive really serious results on the analytical side. And this is something that Enzo will also share as he dives a little bit more in there. But I think a great case study here is a company like Zapier, who's a B2B product that's product-led growth. They want to make it as easy as possible for you to self-serve into trying the platform and then inviting other team members. And they've noticed even just mild changes to the authentication flow can have pretty sizable impacts on the ultimate conversion of B2B customers that sign up for their platform. An example here that I'm showing is if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, this is Zapier's sign-up flow. And there's a few different authentication methods that they're giving to the user. They're giving you sign up with Facebook, sign up with Microsoft, or if you put in work email and name, you can start with a password. But the one that I want to focus on here is the one at the top where it says create a Zapier account with Google. And what it's actually done when I land on Zapier is it recognizes that I have a logged in Chrome session. I have read at Stytch.com and I have read.mcginley-Stempel at Stytch.com, which is our outreach email for handling spam that I get from different sales inbounds. And what's interesting about this is that when Zapier integrated this feature, this very simple feature from Google, where it recognizes the logged in session and presents that as kind of a nudging factor for the user, they saw a 20% increase in conversion for B2B prospects visiting their site. So a really great example of if you take the time to think about what is the proper customer experience and journey, it doesn't just create a seamless experience for the consumer, it actually changes your acquisition cost for customers and the lifetime value that you can derive from them. One other example that I wanted to offer here is that something that we see is that typically users will want different variety of options because not every user will want the same authentication option or have the same preference. An example here is a customer of ours, Chesley, where you'll see that if this is the user login preference over time. At first, they started with just email magic links and email OTP. Then they found that a number of consumers were asking for things like passwords or Google OAuth because they wanted a more seamless experience for what their normal workflow is online. And once they added that, you can see how Google OAuth became the predominant option with 78% of users choosing Google, 15% choosing email, and 7% choosing passwords. And generally the lesson here is just to meet your users where they are and allow them to choose the option that is most simple for them to get started and try out your product. The other thing that we wanted to mention here, though, is that sign up and login methods are just one part of B2B auth. the other piece that I'm sure Enzo will talk about as well is how important it is post sign up to make sure that your onboarding flow is focused on what are the key activation metrics that make you make it more possible or make it more likely that that user will stick around over time. And one of the kind of common activation metrics that matters for most B2B SaaS apps is invitations. Once you add another team member to your organization, it greatly increases the chance that you not only get the proper value out of the product, but that you come back to it. So making sure that you're thinking about where to place member invitations in the onboarding flow is really critical for activation and retention. And then the second piece comes down to how do you make it as easy as possible for other team members at that organization or at that company to join an existing organization, and also self-serve their authentication settings for the organization. An example of this, and this is one of the first issues that we ran into at Stytch when we were building B2B auth, is that we didn't have this concept of discovering an existing organization. So we would have user A at company1.com sign up for Stytch account, and then we'd have user B come in and come through the same sign up flow. And to us, that would create two different users in our system rather than allowing us to reconcile them on the organizational data model. And really the problem there is that now you're creating both an issue with somebody accessing what they want to access, but also you're seeing a problem here where often the user will be forced to reach out to support, and then there's a real support cost, headache, and a consumer frustration around them just trying to use the product. So here's a good example of if you want to make sure that you make this as seamless as possible for your customers to join an existing organization, you can have these auth settings when somebody creates an org that do things like allow members with a Stytch.com email to discover this organization and auto join. Or if you don't want to allow them to auto join, you can have them send a request to the admin, which in this example that I've highlighted here, it's my co-founder, Juliana. An example of this that maybe you're familiar with is if you've ever used Slack's sign-up flow for the B2B side, you may belong to multiple organizations. And if you authenticate with your email, either through an OAuth provider or something like a magic link, you'll be given the option of which organization do you want to join, either an existing one, or in this example, you see Acme Health is allowing you to join a new organization that is likely has the setting of you can discover it if you verified your email. And this becomes really powerful for increasing the number of members on an organization, and so therefore making it more effective and also stickier as a B2B SaaS experience. Overall, I think one of the things that commonly comes up is just how much B2B authentication changes for you as your customer segment grows and scales. You may just need simple things in the early days like authentication methods and org level auth settings when you're just serving startups. As you start serving SMBs, upmarket enterprise, that's when things like just-in-time provisioning will come up, SAML and OIDC SSO support, supporting multiple SSO connections per company, switching between organizations if someone has multiple organizations. So overall, it becomes a very complex ordeal over time. And the key things to think about are, what are those features, not only that allow you to serve those customers, but even sometimes allow you to also segment willingness to pay. A common one that you'll see people criticize is actually something called the SSO tax, where a lot of B2B products will charge you more in order to access their application with SSO. And while I think there's credible criticisms of that, one of the things that it does reveal is that the companies that are requiring SSO are much higher willingness to pay because they're typically enterprises that don't just want to allow their users to sign in with Google or Microsoft. They want to be able to sign in with Okta or Cloudflare or whatever their SSO provider is that they're using. And some of the other features that you can anticipate needing to build as you become enterprise ready are things like MFA, just-in-time provisioning, approved domains, etc. So if I could leave you with anything here before I allow Enzo to dive in a little bit more to the analytical side, it's that if you invest early, you can save a lot of future headaches, but also unlock a lot of future growth. So things to think about are, how do you model this one user to many organization, this organization relationship, and allow users to seamlessly both sign up, but also access existing organizations. And this is where things like just-in-time provisioning and self-serve organization auth settings come into play. And then finally, in your org data model, you'll want to anticipate the need to scale ultimately to those larger and more complex enterprise needs such as SSO, multiple SSO connections, et cetera, as even if you're, a startup that's just serving other startups today, that's often in the future where a bulk of your revenue is going to come from a few years down the line as you start to go up market and close those enterprise deals. And Enzo, before we jump into analytics, I'm curious, just based on your experience, you built OAuth in the past. Obviously, you're very deep into B2B authentication and signup flows at June itself. Anything in there that you would either add, highlight, or provide any examples from your own learnings at June?
Yeah, I mean, a good one that just sparkled is I was chatting with the first success person at Notion a month ago on the podcast, and I asked him what was the highest leverage feature that his team, the success team, pushed to the product team that they built that had the biggest impact. And true story, like I'm not lying here. He actually told me SSO. It was really like the product basically for Notion was ready for the enterprise, and they were missing just the gateway basically. So yeah, security can be a feature, and I think this is one thing I've seen in my experience.
Wow, Enzo, we've got to put you on our sales team or our marketing team, because I didn't even tee you up for that, but I appreciate the anecdote. Awesome. Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about the analytical side, and so I'll hand it off to you just to walk through some of those details.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, the first part was super clear. Let me try to change the slides. Yes. Ooh. I think you're changing the slides, right? Or am I? No, I am. Okay, great. Awesome. So I'll touch a bit on the flip side of the coin. We touch about, the onboarding experience, and especially the early touch point of the onboarding, which is the auth process and why it's important. It's really, really critical. The way now we're going to touch a little bit into, how this journey looks like and how you can use your data to actually, measure it and improve it. So a couple of things. So first thing first, I don't know. Can we go back in full screen, Reed, by any chance?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you. So the first thing that we're going to go through is actually the method you can use to use data and leverage data to understand, how your onboarding is performing. And so I think here there are really three things that matters a lot. The first thing is that it's very important to look with a quite coarse-grained approach when you look at your onboarding. Ultimately, what you're trying to achieve is people to reach your product and get the value and stick around. And so what you're trying really to get is people that, get started with your product, go through the auth, go through the onboarding, but then start using your product and keep coming back. And so a nice way to think about this concept is the concept of activation, which is basically the checkpoints that people need to take or accounts needs to take to retain on your product. And so here, I think a really nice way to think about it is some checkpoints that people can go through, such as the one that I put in the middle, signing up, getting set up, connecting their data source, using your product, whatever amount of times in the first week, and trying to come up with what these milestones can be. Here, there is a very simple method with data, which consists in looking into your best accounts, so the companies or the users that stay the most, and actually try to understand what they do. And you can just do that exercise granularly, look into their first sessions and the action they have done, and try to find some patterns. As you find these patterns of what are the consistent things that people do to stick around, you can formalize these milestones. And actually, with a tool like June or other data tools that you can tweak around, you're going to be able to find out if people complete these milestones and organize your organizations, whether it's product success, marketing, to make sure that people or companies check in these milestones. I think this one is a very important concept to understand, because a successful onboarding is about getting people to keep using your product. It's not just about getting people to land on your product the first time. If you do that, you're going to get a peak of conversion rate in the signup, but you're also going to get a drop off afterward. So what you're looking for is to build something very healthy from end to end. So I think this is very interesting in regards to the Zapier use case that you mentioned, Reed. they had a peak of sign up because of course there is less friction to sign up with one tap. But I think what was very cool for them is that actually they didn't create a dark pattern, or so they didn't trick their customers into a good product, right? There was actually an intent there, and it just streamlined the process. The second thing I wanted to share is that not every sign up is equal in B2B SaaS. When you have a B2B SaaS with an auth process, an onboarding that people can go through, you're going to get a lot of people that go through. And so your job is actually to identify relevant signups, to learn things and improve. I think there are three things that matters a lot. The first thing is understand where the people are coming from. It's very common when people sign up to a product to capture the source of the sign up. So it can be a UTM, these parameters that you have in the URL that you pass to the users after they sign up, or it can be just a question that you ask your customers about. You can just ask, where did you hear from us? Things like that. This is very important because if you find out who is successful in your onboarding and then in your product, you might find out which channel, go-to-market channel, is the most successful. You may also break down the users based on their persona or ICP by also attributing some extra information. So you may ask people's role or job or level of expertise with your product, or maybe just the mission they're trying to achieve with your product. All this information is information that you can use later on to actually improve your onboarding and help your success sales team to actually improve the conversion or the quality of the onboarding over time. There are some accounts also that maybe will require more high touch support, some accounts that are very happy to self-serve or maybe less strategic and you should spend less time on them. And I think the last piece of information is the overall success of the onboarding, right? I talk about the activation and breaking down your data, the user data, but you can actually also look at the overall success. And this is usually the most actionable information for a product team that usually tries to solve the problems for the biggest amount of user. Not always, but oftentimes, I'd say. The last piece is that I wanted to share about is going beyond just the conversion. And I think something which is pretty important to understand is that when people get started on your website, they tend to be anonymous users. They're just random people visiting your website. You don't know who they are. They just agreed on your cookie policy and you have a random number attached to them, but you don't really know who they are. When people start getting into your product, they go through the auth and the onboarding, they become one of your users, right? They give you an email, a password, at least maybe more information. And here, what's important to understand is that analytics are able to reconcile the anonymous data with the identified data just by making sure that you have a setup which is cross-functional between the website and the app. So it's getting a little bit technical, but here the point is that if you are able to look beyond just the conversion rate in your onboarding flow and you're able to connect the earlier touch point of your marketing website, you are also going to be able to improve a lot over time your onboarding based on this information. I'll move on to the next piece of the analytics part of things. So these are examples, sorry. So what I wanted to say is that an onboarding is never set in stone. You will always iterate on it. These are examples of onboarding flows that we had at June. On the left side is what we call a self-serve with a forced assist. It's very similar to what Superhuman did, which consists in letting people sign up, but at some point we offer them a calendar so they take a call with us. It was great because a lot of people were taking these calls and the activation was better for them. But the problem with that was that it would turn off a lot of people that were not so motivated, right? So over time, our onboarding has evolved into what we call a branch onboarding, which is that you can either self-serve the product yourself if you're efficient with tech and you're able to set up June, or you can actually invite someone else to support you within your organization. And actually, we made also the Calendly invite optional. So you can take the call, but you can also skip it. We figure these things over time by iterating. And I think this is something important to understand with your onboarding flow, different ways of doing it, different authentication methods, different steps, funnels that people can take will lead to different outcomes that also can be tied to your organization and what are the strategic goals that you have. This is the more technical section. Actually, the next one is the most technical one. I'm going to drill a little bit down into the concept that I just mentioned. So if you want to visualize in an easy way the onboarding, so not the activation, but more the onboarding, so this early piece, which is a bit more linear of the user journey, you can usually do it with a funnel view. And the way you can do that is by tracking the actions that people take in your onboarding. So usually an onboarding is a series of steps that people can take. And what you can do is you can track the action at each of the steps to make sure that they complete it. Something that we often promote is to track less rather than more. The problem when you track too many things in your product is that they would get outdated. You're going to lose the context about what is what. And so here, my advice is to track the first step and the last step of your onboarding if you can, and just look into this coarse grain number and try to understand if it's good. You can find out if it's good or not by talking to other startups, other product managers, other founders. If you have investors, you can also talk with them, and they have a lot of other portfolio companies that can be good references for you. I mentioned earlier that it's very important to break down your information. The way you can do that is by attaching information to the users to classify this user and then segment them. The most common ways are the source of the traffic. I mentioned that, but also information about the users. So this could be the email, the role, the company. It can also be any sign-up method they use. So it could be very interesting to understand if based on the auth method or sign-up method that they use, for instance, with Stytch, if these people are sticking more or less. For instance, you don't want to have people signing up too quickly if then they don't really understand your value prop, right? So it's always about finding this good balance. The last piece is the piece on tracking. So we started from like the activation and the coarse grain concept. Then we went into how it looks like, how you can break it down. The last piece is about technically how you do that. So if you're not familiar with tracking and analytics, it's fairly simple. There are two main concepts. The first one is the identify or the identify call. What it means is that when people sign up to your product and start your onboarding, you're able to capture personal information about them. So technically, it looks like a couple of lines of code that you put in your sign up code or your login code, and you're able to attach any information that you think is relevant. For instance, the email or any other information that people give to you. This is the main difference between product analytics and marketing analytics and tools like Google Analytics, for instance. They don't help you. They don't let you capture the personal information. They were built for other purposes. The second piece is the track event. The track event, if you're familiar with Google Analytics, is like the equivalent of a tag. It's a specific action in your product that will be recorded when it happened. And again, it's a line of code. And it's very explicit. It's usually button clicked with a past tense, so you know explicitly that the action was performed. The last piece is from web to programmatic. Is again, if you want to reconcile the information between people when they came from your website to your product, there is a way to do that. Most tracking tools or analytics tools out there have a very well crafted documentation to help you do that. It can be quite interesting to understand again end-to-end the success of your onboarding flow and your activation flow. So that's about it on my side, Reed and folks. I hope it was clear. I think maybe I will ask you also the same question you asked me, Reed, in the light of what I discussed and the things you know and you've seen in your career. Is there anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I was thinking about when you mentioned the different iterations that you can do on onboarding and some of the questions or additional data that you can collect, I think one of the ones that we've debated adding as a field in onboarding, and I think both I'm curious if you have direct experience with it, but I also do think this speaks to the helpfulness of having a really simple product analytics platform where you can just run this as a test rather than debate it internally without a data-driven answer. Is we've thought about adding that question of how did you hear about us? Because while UTM terms are helpful, they're obviously not exhaustive, and a lot of traffic that comes to your site and signs up doesn't have one. And so it's something that we always ask on like live sales calls, but because we have a large self-serve contingent, there's lots of users that we don't know how they found us. So I was curious, at June, do you ask that question in the onboarding flow? The debate that we've always had internally for why we've not done it, but I think is probably just more ammunition for why we should test it and just see how it goes, is that we've had questions about if you require it, you lose some conversion, which may be okay because that might be low intent traffic anyways. If you don't require it, you might not really get any responses. And so I think it's still one of those things we need to test, but I'm curious what your experience has been with adding additional fields, and in particular fields like that give you the right information to bake into other parts of your company, like marketing strategy, et cetera.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the quick answer would be that I think there is a maximum amount of information you can ask in the onboarding, and that people are willing to, dedicate time to. And if you haven't reached that critical mass, which in my opinion is like 2 to 3 questions, or like 2 screens and like 2 to 3 questions maybe in B2B SaaS, especially if if there is no reasons why you should ask more questions, then I wouldn't ask that question on top of it, because as you said, it's things that you can capture elsewhere. It's also data that you can enrich afterward, right? I don't need to ask you, how you hear about us if I know that, that day I ran a huge campaign somewhere, So that's my TLDR. The thing which is interesting is that it's actually sometimes a pretty good leverage for startups that don't know how to do marketing attribution and can actually cut short on this problem by just asking it. So a startup usually does a lot of things, a lot of tests, and they usually have very poor ways of attributing sign up. And it's a very heavy problem. Like, I'm sure you've seen that it takes a lot of resources to try to solve this problem. And even though you're trying very hard to solve it, sometimes you're not 100% sure that it's accurate. Just asking the question can actually be a way to completely solve that problem, because people will just tell you. And even if your tracking was not accurate, or you lost some data along the way or whatever, then you have like an accurate answer, right? So I think that can be pretty fantastic. The only caveat though, and I'll wrap it up with this one, is that when you ask people questions, they might also answer random answers. And so the way you design that question should be in a way that avoids that, right? So there should be a backdoor. There should be a way for people to escape that question. And also the way you're going to organize the screen may lead to some bias. And so you want to be smart about that. I think that's very important.
That's great context. And for June, outside of like email or OAuth connection, what information do you ask consumers for during their sign up?
Right. So we used to ask this question about how they found us. We kept it because it's very useful for the reason I mentioned. The other question we ask is, we used to ask the role of the person and how much experience they had with the product or with the domain. We don't ask the part of the domain anymore because we felt like we didn't leverage it. And the other question, which is about the role, we stopped asking it because it's data we are able to enrich. We've actually one of our own feature, which is an enrichment feature that we released a couple of months ago, funny enough. Nice. So now we ask very little questions. We ask you first, we ask you email and how you heard about us. And we ask the question that you mentioned, which is, if it's someone that joins an existing organization, we propose them to join the organization. Or if they're the first one, we also ask them if they're eager to have other people joining them later on.
And were there any surprises you found in the data, in the first party data of how you heard about June that were, you wouldn't have expected if you were just looking at the data without that direct first party information?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that took us a while to do was to add the invite step in the onboarding flow, just because, I mean, we're product people, we're not gross marketing people or whatever. And so for us, it was very, very hard to conceptualize that just by adding that step in the beginning of the journey, it could increase the numbers, right? And I think in October, I met a founder that I really respect that told me, like, look, Jude, stop overthinking this one, just put it there and see what happens. And we've done that test, and the uplift was really surprising. I think it was something like 13 to 15% increase of invites. And I think here there was a psychological aspect that I completely under-assessed, which is that when people start using a new product, they tend to be overly excited about it, and they tend to, share it around more than they would do after even a couple of minutes, right? And so that was very surprising to me. Yeah, that's something we'll obviously find out using our own analytics, because we dug through the product a lot. Can I return you the question? What's an exciting and surprising discovery on your side?
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I should have expected you to turn it back, but yeah, I think actually one thing I'll agree with you on, and then one thing that is maybe different about our onboarding flow that we found, that I think we had theories about, but it has been consistent. We definitely have seen that same thing that you mentioned, where if somebody invites another team member, it increases like their likelihood of staying around by double-digit percentage. And so that's something where I think we could even iterate on it being even more prominent, but once you land in the dashboard, invite teammates is a very prominent feature. It's not one of those things that you need to go to the hamburger menu and find out how to do that with your workspace settings. So that's something that we've seen consistent with your experience has really converted well. The other piece though, that I'll mention is that we are very focused on first API call as a metric downstream from sign up, of whether somebody both looked at the product, but then got their hands dirty effectively and actually wanted to play around with it. And so one of the things that we did was we noticed that first API call is really high indicator of somebody's willingness to stick around, because they both try the product, but they also realize one of our big differentiators from our incumbent competitor Auth0 is that we give you much more flexibility and control if you want to touch the direct API, even outside of the UIs and SDKs. And so when we realized how kind of informative that was of somebody sticking around, we built a lot of our API docs around the presumption of you are in a logged in state. You can make API calls from you can copy this code and immediately get started while you're browsing around. And so we pre-fill your test API keys. We try to make it as simple as possible. And so that's one of the things that I think, having seen downstream how that first API call converts to people sticking around, we tried to think about what are the other parts of the product experience, both in when you land in the dashboard, but also when you start clicking around other spots, that we can still make it really easy for you to get that first aha moment.
Love it. Yeah, I didn't talk about the aha moment, but it's the condensed version of your activations. Like, what's the one set of things that people do that make them stick around? I really like this one. I think the one thing I learned in my experience as a product manager is that there can be multiple aha moments. And this is something that people don't usually know. And actually, you may also have a aha moment in your sign-up flow. So I'll give you two examples. When I was PMing at N26, the fintech bank, during the onboarding of the users, there was an onboarding call that you could take with an agent that would prevent you from having to go to a bank branch. And it was 2016, 2017, and it was magical for people. Like, they would talk about this experience all the time. The reason why we built that is because obviously we didn't want to have branches in the streets. And so we had to do it digitally, but for people, that was a aha moment. They started to speak about it, right? So onboarding and sign up can be a aha moment. And actually there was a second one later on in the product. And the second aha moment I had personally was the magic link of Slack. I remember, now it's pretty common, you guys have productized it, but back then, when you didn't have to put a password and you could actually sign up in your product with this nice little magic wand and so on, it was really, really magical, right? And I remember taking a screenshot and sending it to a lot of people. So I think aha moments can be part of the onboarding, and or even sometimes part of the auth.
Definitely. No, those are both great examples. Well, I want to take a moment with the time we have left to turn it over to the audience for Q&A. I see that Sander actually asked, what is the aha moment for June, and what do you track to see if a user will return to the product?
Yeah, cool. Yes. So the aha moment for June is, by the way, Sander, nice to talk with you. I think I sent you an email a couple of days ago, looking forward to maybe catching up. So our moment, I think, if we have one, is landing on the product and seeing the home and seeing everything generated. So I think not having to do anything and getting 12 metrics out of the box that are very well crafted and quite actionable because they come with insights. That's probably the aha moment of June. I'm very conservative on aha moments, so I would be transparent. I'm not sure we have one, and I'm pretty sure most of the products don't have one. You don't need a aha moment to activate people. You don't need a aha moment to be a successful business. In my world, a aha moment is really like a delightful moment where you realize something and you're like, oh my God, this product lets me do that. So in my jargon, it's quite a high bar. What do we track to see if people return to the product? This one, we're using activation. We have a couple of milestones in our activation. What we're trying to check is if people connect to data source, if they invite each other, and then we're trying to see how many times they load one of our reports within the first week. And we're trying to get to 10 reports within the first week. This is kind of the threshold for the activation. And then kind of the cherry on the cake is to integrate June into your workflows. So enabling emails, enabling Slack, all these kind of things. When June is part of your workflows, the product becomes very sticky because by nature, it will start to ping you and you're going to start to receive value on autopilot. So these are the big milestones of June, but they're very different based on the category of product that you're building and also the strategy and the vision that you have. For most analytics out there, being part of your workflow don't really matter. They just try to pull you back in their product all of the time. So they will send you emails which are pretty empty with a CTA to pull you back. June is not, it's not really the philosophy we have. Maybe Reed, you have you want to share your definition of aha moment? Maybe you said connecting the data source, right?
Yeah, so I think you were right to call out that like aha moment is sometimes a strong term for like, I don't know, it's not always groundbreaking what that moment is, but it should be something that makes them realize or click for them what they're going to be able to do with the product. And for us, as you mentioned, we productized Magic Links. That was our first product for auth that we released 3 years ago. And at the time, it was still pretty low adoption generally. Like you had Slack as a great example of somebody that was doing it really well. But I do think the first aha moment for us was you would log into the dashboard and already we'd have the curl snippet ready and you could change it to a different language if you wanted to, but you could just hit run and send yourself a magic link. And so you could get the concept of, oh, this really is like a couple lines of code that I could start using this. We still do really focus on how do we make it really easy for you just to run the examples and see how you could start to imagine how you'd add this to your app. But I think to your point, I think those are product introductions that maybe are aha moments in some cases, but also like you don't have to, it doesn't have to completely convince a person to use your product for, forever. It just needs to get them to the next point of wanting to learn more so that they're interested and engaged, like you mentioned, like connecting data sources, et cetera. And I see we have another couple questions that popped in here. So maybe I'll read the one from Jim and then you and I can talk about what might be the right answer here. So a bit of context for the audience. Jim is the co-founder of a startup for a video engagement analytics company. So like Gmeet, Zoom, they have 10 beta users and a small dev team. They want to start to charge their users, and they're curious what we would suggest to focus on regarding the onboarding flow. They currently support the concept of a workspace, but the struggle they're having is how do we convert that trial company into a paying company without limiting the amount of users in a workspace? And I'd imagine really the thrust of that question, Jim, is how can I start to monetize these users, but not create adverse incentives for them? Because, for example, I want them to invite a lot of users. I want them to be engaged. And so I don't want them to stop doing that, but I do want to, get paid for the value that we're providing. And so maybe as we answer that question, Enzo, I'm curious to hear about this. I'm just curious, what is the first feature that you started upcharging for? For context from the Stytch side, what we did was Magic Links were our first product that we released a few years ago before we built out the rest of the auth platform. And we had a powered by Stytch watermark at the bottom of it, which many of our customers still use, but lots of companies want to completely own the UX and UI of their auth. So the first thing that we made upgradable was removing that powered by Stytch. And obviously it's kind of like a win-win for us because you either pay us to remove it and that's great, we are making money, or we get the natural virality of having that brand out in the world. So that was the first thing that we started charging on, but I'm curious what your experience was at June.
Great, great first feature. I think for us, it was, so I'm pretty sure it was the account level analytics in June. So basically, we started to do some user level analytics so you can understand what a single user does or multiple users do. And then users can belong to companies. And the thing we actually, so they can belong to companies. And as soon as they do, then it becomes more relevant for you to analyze how the company is doing, because you're selling ultimately to your company, and that's what you want to understand. Like if the company has done specific stuff and if the company is retained and kind of healthy also. And it was very natural also for our customers, because what we learned is that a lot of B2B SaaS, when they start, they have very few users, and also they have very few users per workspace. So it's basically when they start to grow and graduate and become more sophisticated, that this concept of working on accounts becomes a new reality. And so as they become more sophisticated, they start to see more value into their analytics stack. And this is where they also consider, paying extra for that. So that's for us. Maybe to answer Jim's question, what do you suggest to focus regarding the onboarding flow? I talk about like going through a lot of iterations. What I didn't show is what we did before. And at the beginning of June, there was no onboarding flow. Like when we had 10 beta users, we just had these links that anyone could access, but it was a really weird URL, and we would send it to people. And then when we knew that the product was delivering value and people were happy with it, this is when we started to consider whether people should self-serve or not. And then we started to, build the onboarding flow. And then there was the question of like, do we buy or do we build the auth? But I think at the stage you're at, you probably want to make sure that people get the value from your product before over investing into the onboarding flow. So, because it takes a lot of time, even if you use tools out of the box like Stytch, it will take a lot of time, right? So maybe at your stage, I would suggest, except if you're like in a fast scaling environment and you're going to have 1 million people next month or 1,000 people next month, I would probably encourage to postpone a little bit building the onboarding flow to try to make sure that the core value of your product is, hitting the targets.
Yeah, and I think one thing I'd echo there, Enzo, is with 10 beta users, one of the nice benefits of that is you could theoretically talk to every single one of them and figure out like what is their tipping point where this becomes something where it's a no-brainer for them to pay for this. And there's some exercises that you can do where you ask like what would be clearly way too expensive to pay for this product, what would be way too cheap, and then you can kind of back into like the average that people seem to be conveying as like the median price they're willing to pay. Where it comes to your question about like features to charge people on, I definitely agree with you. Don't charge people yet on anything that you think will constrain growth. So like number of users per organization, etc. That may be something you consider in the future. I would instead try to focus on, are there like add-ons or pieces that are and the reason like to remove the Stytch watermark was an example that we did it on, was we knew there were lots of companies that were early enough to stage and didn't care enough about their brand control that they were just okay to use it. But anytime somebody wanted brand control, it was a great example of like segmenting them into somebody that cared about that, and so therefore would upgrade. So if there are features that you can think about for your products where people segment themselves into a certain cohort that cares more about X or Y, that's where I would focus on. And then we had another question from Sander about at what point you should start building complex authentications. When you get asked from enterprise companies or when you want to go after enterprise customers. I think this is very similar to what you were just saying, Enzo, which is like, don't invent the wheel until you have to. I would say don't build things like SSO until you know that there are customers that are asking you for it and that it will be a requirement. Because the one thing you don't want to do is build it a year in advance of actually being able to serve that customer, because you could have used that time on other product features. The thing that I'll say that you should just think about early is, do you have the right organizational data model that makes it easy for you to adapt to the new requirements that those customers might require in the future? and make it like a one sprint thing in order for you to add something like that and close the deal. And so, I won't plug Stytch too much, but I do think that is one of the things that we tried to do with our B2B product, is get the organizational data model right for customers so that they don't need to think about it and the headaches that come with scaling as those new requests come in. So yeah, I would say don't build SSO until you absolutely need it, but do think about if it changes assumptions in your data model and if you'll have to rewrite everything once those more complex requests start coming in. And then, yeah, I think the other comment that you had, Sander, was around the Powered by Zendesk and how important that was for growth. That was also similar to my last company, Plaid. We had Plaid branding when you would connect your bank account with like Venmo, Coinbase, Robinhood. Super powerful. And I think if you have a product where you have enough control over the market and there's few enough competitors where you can mandate that somebody has to use your brand, I think some companies can get away with that. Like, maybe Zendesk even mandates it. I'm not sure what their protocol is, but I know Plaid mandated it as kind of like a user consent element. And that was really powerful for them. I do think us being in authentication, we're always competing against somebody being able to build this in-house. And so we always want to be thoughtful about how to make it as easy as possible for it to look like your brand. And the last thing I wanted to note, just because it came to mind regarding both Jim's and Sanders' last questions about, what features will people pay for or what do they want? The other thing that we've done in the past are painted door tests, where like when we've had kind of a debate internally on which feature would somebody prefer. For example, we were debating, do people want internationalization, where they want us to translate all of our UI and our emails into different languages, or do they want full custom HTML templates? In the past, when we've been debating two things like that about what will people pay for, we've just put both of them into our dashboard as like request early access to these features. And we were effectively just analyzing the disparity. And where we thought they were pretty equal to start, we found that it was a 10-to-1 preference for custom HTML templates over internationalization at the time that we did this test about 6 to 9 months ago. So that was pretty easy for us sequencing which one to work on first. Awesome. Well, yeah. And you can use June's analytics to help you determine what people are hovering over more there, what they're clicking on, what they're converting on when it comes to those different painted door tests. Awesome. Well, Enzo, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really fun to chat with you and June about how to build and analyze a high-performing B2B signup flow. And if people have any other questions, they can find me at stytch.com, STYTCH. I'm Reed at stytch.com if you want to send me a note. And how can they best get in contact with you, Enzo?
LinkedIn is usually where I spend most of my time these days. So Enzo Avigo, there should be only one.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. And thanks for the audience for the great questions and discussion. And let us know if you have any follow-up questions. We'll make sure to make this recording live so that you can dive back into any specifics that were interesting in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, folks. Bye.